How's it going, folks? We're just over 24 hours away from the only sporting event on Earth right now, as far as the only major sporting event that's happening on Earth right now, UFC 249, going down tomorrow night. Well, the prelims start tomorrow afternoon. The main card starts tomorrow night in Florida, an absolutely stacked card. We got Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gage as the main event. Henry the Messenger, a.k.a. Triple C Cejudo, versus Dominic Cruz, who's coming back off a 3-year layoff as the co-main event for the bantamweight title. The first fight is for the lightweight title. Then we have Francis Ngannou versus Jaron Rosen. Two very powerful strikers. One is undefeated. One has been an absolute beast and feared in the heavyweight division for years now. We also have some other very entertaining fights. On the prelims for the last card, we have Donald Cerrone versus Anthony Pettis. We have Jeremy Stephens versus Kelvin Kattar, which in itself is a great fight. Guaranteed war right there, in my opinion. We also have other good fights like Uriah versus Jacare Sosa. Excellent stylistic matchup. Fabricio Werdum versus Olynyk. Greg Hardy versus Jorgen de Castro. And I can go on with the rest of the list, but Nico Price versus Vicente Luque. It's all in all going to be a great card. I kind of disagree with the fact that the UFC is putting this on pay-per-view. Not 100% disagree with them, because I understand they're a company, they need to make money. It probably cost them a ton of money to get this card together, and extra money due to the COVID pandemic, of course. And I'm sure they had to recoup some kind of losses, but they should have did something where they maybe did a giveaway on their channel and 10% of fans could get to watch the pay-per-view for free. They enter a contest like a lotto thing. If you win, you get the pay-per-view for free. You get a code that gives you the pay-per-view for free. Or they could have discounted it instead of making it $79.99. They could have went out of their way and made it $59.99, because there are people that are all over the world right now, especially in the United States and Canada, because that's where I'm from. I'm from Canada, and I know a lot of what's going on in North America. I'm not really watching everything that's happening all over the world. But I know that in the United States and Canada, a lot of people are out of work. A lot of people are struggling just to put food on their table for their family. They definitely can't afford to pay $79.99 for a UFC pay-per-view, even though it is stacked, even though it is an awesome card, and it is the only sporting event in the world. There's just so many people that aren't in a position to pay that kind of money to watch a pay-per-view. But that's just a little tidbit that I had. I thought maybe the UFC could put a discount on the pay-per-view, offer the pay-per-view free to certain people, a way to win the pay-per-view, win the ability to watch the pay-per-view, but that didn't happen. I kind of do understand why the UFC are doing what they're doing. They need to make money. They need to pay the fighters. They're not going to have any gates. They're not going to have any fans in the stands. But they are going to get a ton of ratings. I'm sure pretty much everybody that can afford it is going to be tuning into the main card, and there's going to be a lot of people watching the free prelims. I have a feeling this is going to set a viewer record for sure, because there are no other sports. Even if you're not a massive MMA fan, people that are just dying to watch some competitive sports, maybe even something to bet on with their friends, are going to be watching this card for sure. But let's get into the fights. I'd like to skim through 4 fights quickly, and then I'm going to go a little bit in depth on the 4 fights that I would like to talk about the most. And I'm sorry I'm shooting at this ghetto angle. I know it's different. It's not the style I usually use. My newborn baby's in my bedroom asleep, so I can't wake her up, and I'm in my kitchen, so I couldn't really do much of a setup. I'm doing the best I can with it, but I hope you guys enjoy the videos. And if you do like these MMA videos, you do like these MMA picks, more UFC talk, feel free to let me know in the comments, because I'll pump out as many videos as I can when it comes to UFC, because there is no hockey on the go right now. I will, of course, be doing as much Montreal Canadiens prospect videos and stuff like that as I can, and hockey card breaks, but there really isn't a lot to talk about when it comes to hockey right now until they get the ball moving and see if the season reopens. But let's get into some fights. The very first fight I would like to talk about, we have Jeremy Stephens versus Kelvin Kattar. 2 fighters coming off a loss. One who's kind of on the back end of his career in Stephens. I do like Jeremy Stephens, but he's not the fighter he was. He doesn't put his combos together the way he used to get that big power punch off at the end. He's just basically looking for that one big shot in a lot of fights. Doesn't use his wrestling the way he used to. He does have good wrestling defense. He is super tough, but he's just not what he used to be. I don't see him as a legit contender. There was a time at featherweight and at lightweight I thought this guy could legitimately contend for a belt someday, but it just doesn't look like that's going to happen. He's coming off a loss to I know Kattar lost to Sabit in his last fight, and Stephens lost to Yair Rodriguez in a decision. Both of these fighters lost decisions in their last fight. But in Kelvin Kattar's case, it was supposed to be a 5-round fight, ended up turning out to be a 3-round fight in Russia. Pretty much everything against the guy, because Sabit's from Russia, from that part of the country, from that part of the world at least. And it ended up being a 3-round fight. And if it had to be a 5-round fight, I think Kattar would have won. It was a 3-round fight. Sabit won 2 rounds. Kattar won 1 round, in my opinion. But at the end of the fight, like Kattar said, Sabit looked like he ran a marathon. And if it had to be 5 rounds, I don't think Sabit would have got out of the 4th. I think he would have got finished, just judging by the way he looked. He clearly was not prepared for a 5-round fight, and there's already issues with that guy's gas tank. So Kattar, he's a really, really exciting fighter. He has some good wins under his belt. He beat guys like I believe his name's Kyle Bachiak. He beat some really good fighters. I like Kelvin Kattar. I'm going to have to pick him in this one. I think he's going to get a decision. I don't think he's going to finish Jeremy Stephens. As much as Jeremy Stephens is at the back end of his career, doesn't fight the way he used to, doesn't seem to have the aggression the way he used to, I just don't see Kelvin Kattar finishing him. He's tough as nails, has a ton of heart. It's going to take a lot to put that guy down, in my opinion. So for that one, I'm going to have to go with Kattar by decision, unanimous decision. The next fight I'd like to talk about is Greg Hardy versus Uriah Castro. I don't know a lot about the Castro. I know he's a big heavyweight. He's a big puncher, has a lot of power. And Greg Hardy is an explosive athlete, came out of the NFL, came into the UFC, has kind of a shady record. His first win was a disqualification. But what I have seen from Greg Hardy is he has a ton of power in his hands. And if this fight goes any longer than the first round, unless the Castro's gas tank is as bad as Hardy's, I don't see Hardy winning this fight. But I do think Greg Hardy's going to win this fight. I think he's going to pressure the Castro, get him up against the cage, and just land bombs on him, and eventually land one big hook or uppercut that's going to knock the guy down, knock the guy out, and then he'll finish him, if he's not already KO'd stiff. But I'm picking Greg Hardy by KO in that within the first 2 minutes of the fight, because that's just how Greg Hardy does it. And in the second fight, we have, in my opinion, the best stylistic matchup on the card. We have a world-class striker in Uriah Hall. Fans of The Ultimate Fighter will know what I'm talking about when it comes to Uriah Hall. He maybe hasn't beat the top-tier fighters in the UFC like he did on The Ultimate Fighter, but if you watch what he did on that show, that guy's striking is world-class. Crazy roundhouse kicks, kicks from everywhere, excellent punches, jabs, unorthodox at times, super technical at other times. Love Uriah Hall's striking, but then he's coming up against a beast in Jacare Sosa, who once he gets his hands on you, drags you to the ground, can strangle you, is an absolute beast when it comes to jiu-jitsu. Next to Damian Maia and maybe Gilbert Burns, he is the best jiu-jitsu practitioner in MMA, and he also has really good striking. He has powerful punches. He puts his punches together well. Don't throw a lot of kicks, but I don't think he's going to want to stand too long with the guy like Uriah Hall. Yes, he does have pretty good striking. He does have power. Doesn't have the level of striking Uriah Hall has. I see Jacare at some point getting a takedown, maybe halfway through the first round. He's probably going to have to absorb a few strikes from Hall, clinch him up against the cage, and eventually he will get him down and will submit him. I'm going to pick Jacare Sosa by first round submission, probably about 3 minutes into the first round. I think he's going to get Uriah Hall down, and I'm going to say he's going to get an arm bar or something like that, a Kimura, something where he gets Uriah Hall's arm and twists it sideways. That's just how I see it going down, just my personal opinion, and it shouldn't be a bold pick. Then we have the return of Fabricio Werdum versus the Strangler, Olynyk. I'm not going to go a lot into this. I do believe in ring rust, unless you're Dominic Cruz, because that guy's an animal. I do believe in ring rust. Werdum has been out of the game now for like 2 years. He hasn't fought in like 2 years. Olynyk's been active. He's been strangling people left, right, and center. I have a feeling this fight will eventually go to the ground. Werdum is a bit better on the feet, but I have a feeling Olynyk will either get a takedown, pull guard, and it's a very, very bold pick. I know this is a bold pick because Werdum has submitted guys like Fedor. He's a beast on the ground. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. But I have a feeling Olynyk is going to pull off the submission in this. Whether it's off his back, whether he's on top of Werdum, this dude's just a strangler, and he got tons of strength in his arms. Like, once he gets his arms around your neck, you pretty much have no chance. And I know it's a very bold prediction. A lot of people will probably call me crazy for this, but I have a feeling that Alexei Olynyk is going to win this in the second round by submission. Then we go into the 4 fights that I really want to talk about. The fights that everybody's truly interested in. Not saying the other fights aren't interesting by any means, but these are the 4 fights that really stand out in hardcore MMA fans' minds. And the first one I would like to talk about is a rematch from like 6 or 7 years ago. Anthony Pettis, who's 22-10-0, versus Donald Cerrone, who's unbelievably 36-14-0. 50 freaking fights for Cerrone, man. And notable wins for Cerrone: Matt Brown, Eddie Alvarez, and Jim Miller. And like I said, these guys fought. Notable wins for Anthony Pettis: Donald Cerrone. He finished Donald Cerrone back in the day with a kick to the body, followed up with a few punches. Beautiful, beautiful win for Pettis. Got the technical knockout finish. And his record is 22-10-0. Notable wins over Donald Cerrone, Benson Henderson, and Wonder Boy. And he does have other notable wins. Those are just the top three that come to my mind right now. In this fight, I think it's going to be a classic striker versus striker matchup. It's going to stay on the feet. Both guys are going to have a Muay Thai stance. But I think Pettis is just a little bit more fresher, has took less beatings in his day. Yes, he's had a few injuries, but Cerrone has been through wars, man. And recently, too, he got finished by Ferguson. Well, he blew his nose in the corner and his eye blew out, but he was getting demolished by Ferguson. He got absolutely railroaded by Justin Gage. At KO'd, like, the weirdest KO I ever seen. It looked like he was still conscious, but at the same time, he was out of it. And even Gage was telling the ref to stop it. He definitely had a concussion from that fight, in my opinion. From seeing people in hockey and just people I know in general getting concussions, he seemed like he had a concussion in that fight. And then not even that long after it, a few months after it, he goes out and gets destroyed by Conor McGregor in 40 seconds. And the old Donald Cerrone, I know he took a lot of shoulders to the face. He took a head kick. The old Donald Cerrone, like Cerrone said, Donald showed up to that fight. Cowboy didn't show up. If Cowboy had to show up to that fight, prime Donald Cerrone, I do not think it would have went that way. I still think McGregor would have won the fight. I really do think McGregor would have won the fight. But in 40 seconds, destruction like that, I just don't see it. I think Donald Cerrone's at the back end of his career, and I think Anthony Pettis kind of is too, but he's a little bit more fresher, has a little bit more of an unorthodox style, but at the same time can be super technical, but knows how to throw crazy, funky kicks, Showtime kicks off the cage and stuff like that. And I have a feeling he will eventually catch Cerrone, and Cerrone's chin isn't what it used to be, and he could go down quick. So I'm going to pick Anthony Pettis by head kick, KO, early in the second round. And I hate to say it because I am a big Cowboy fan. I'm more of a fan than Cowboy than what I am of Pettis. I want Cowboy to win this fight. But as far as a pick goes, if I was a betting man, I'm going to say Anthony Pettis. Second round, head kick KO, vintage Pettis. And then we go on to a fight diehard fans, especially fans of the heavyweight division, have to see. This fight, in no doubt in my mind, it's not going to be Derek Lewis versus Ngannou over again. This fight is going to end with a KO. We have Jairzinho Rosen strike, 10-0-0, all KOs, notable wins over Overeem, Arlovsky, and I wrote down Alan Crowder because I couldn't find any other notable wins. And then we got Ngannou, the absolute beast of the heavyweight division, 14-3-0, notable wins over Overeem, Blades twice, and JDS. And he does have other notable wins, but those are just the three that come to my mind right now. And in this one, I'm going to have to go with Ngannou by KO quick. I think he's going to KO Rosenstrike in the first round quick. What I've seen from Rosenstrike in the Alistair Overeem fight is he's susceptible to a lot of damage. He can get hit a lot. Overeem was beating him every second of every round in that fight until the last 10 seconds when he landed that big shot. And unfortunately for Rosenstrike in this fight, Francis Ngannou is not Alistair Overeem. You will not absorb shots like that from Francis Ngannou. After a while, he will put you down if he doesn't put you down right away. Ngannou hits like a Mack truck. I believe he has the hardest recorded punch in MMA. I know Rosenstrike himself is a beast, has some amazing KOs under his belt. KO'd Arlovsky, KO'd the last guy he fought, Overeem. It was a bit controversial, but I agree with the stoppage because Overeem's face was like hanging off. His lip was torn right up the side. But I'm going to have to go with Francis Ngannou. KO in this one. He has more experience. He looks to be more of a power striker. These guys have a very similar style. And I think in the end, Ngannou will be the one that lands the big shot that puts Rosenstrike down. But it could go either way because Rosenstrike has ridiculous power as well. And we all know Francis isn't scared to get in there and throw down. And if he eats the wrong shot, it could be lights out. It's the heavyweight division. Anything could happen. I'm sorry if my eyes keep going off to the side a bit, guys. I'm not used to filming like this, and my phone camera's over on this side, but I'm always used to looking over this way because when I film the other way, my phone camera's over to the right. So it's throwing me off a little bit, I'm not going to lie. I'm not used to filming like this, but I hope you guys are enjoying the picks. And then we go into the co-main event. Triple C himself, the king of cringe, the guy who I personally am a fan of. You cannot deny this guy is one of the best fighters in the UFC. Henry Cejudo, 15-2-0, notable wins over TJ Dillashaw, Demetrius Johnson, and Marlon Moraes. Then we have Dominic Cruz. He's versus Dominic Cruz. Henry Cejudo versus Dominic Cruz, excuse me. Cruz is 22, 2-0. Notable wins over Uriah Faber, TJ Dillashaw, and Demetrius Johnson. So they do have some similar opponents. Both of these guys have beat Dillashaw and Johnson, both of which are world-class fighters, especially Demetrius Johnson. For a nice while was considered the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and some people still consider Demetrius Johnson the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. In this fight, it's a bold prediction, and it's not just because I'm a big fan of the guy. I'm going with Dominick Cruz. I think he's going to give Henry Cejudo a look that he's never seen before. Cejudo has this weird karate style where he wants to land some shots on you, but eventually he pressures you with his wrestling. He gets you up against the cage, and I don't think that's going to work against Dominick Cruz. Cruz is just too unorthodox, too good of takedown defense. Unless he's really rusty and those injuries really have affected him. If he's anything like the Dominick Cruz that fought TJ Dillashaw, the Dominick Cruz that dominated the bantamweight division for years, I do not see Henry Cejudo beating him. He's too rangy, he's too tall, he's too long for Cejudo. I think he'll pick him apart with shots. I don't think he's going to finish Henry. Henry has a ton of heart. He has a solid chin. He's the type of guy that's going to be very, very hard to put down, especially to knock out. And the Cruz doesn't have a ton of power, but I do think over 5 rounds, he will pick Henry apart. He will frustrate Henry. He will eventually have Henry diving for takedowns, which he won't get. And Cruz may even take him to the ground himself. But I do think Dominick Cruz is going to win this fight. I think he's going to be rangy, use his great takedown defense and his length to stand back at a distance, land a ton of jabs, land a ton of that unorthodox striking, his funky head movement and footwork that he has. And Cejudo is just going to be swinging at air for 5 rounds, and Cruz is going to walk away with the belt again, and it's going to be absolutely historic. It's going to be amazing. Like, this guy already came back off a 3-year layoff, beat TJ Dillashaw, who at the time was an animal, came back when Cruz lost his belt, and Dillashaw won his belt again. He was on EPO for all we know, and Cruz still beat him. And he managed to win his belt there, so to come back 3 years again after more injuries and beat Henry Cejudo, who's even better than Dillashaw at this point, an absolute beast, the bantamweight champion, if he pulls this off, it's historic, guys, and it really, in my mind, solidifies why he says ring rust isn't real. It depends on your mindset. It depends on the fighter. And with him, ring rust truly isn't real, at least from what I've seen. And then we go into the fight everybody wants to talk about, everybody wants to know about, and hopefully the viewers of this channel are looking forward to this fight as well. Tony Ferguson, El Kukui Ferguson, 25-3-0, a ton of notable wins over Cerrone, RDA, Kevin Lee, Pettis, Barbosa, those are the ones that just come off the top of my head, versus Justin Gage, 21-2-0, been on an absolute tear. Notable wins over Donald Cerrone, James Vick, Michael Johnson, and Edson Barbosa. And I do have to state, the one guy who did beat Tony Ferguson in the UFC is one of the guys Justin Gage beat, Michael Johnson. This fight, like Dana White said, is guaranteed to be fireworks. This is going to be an absolute war. It's going to be Ferguson versus Gage. Now, the reason why I'm saying it right now, I think Tony Ferguson is going to win this fight. I think he's going to win it either by doctor stoppage or TKO. Eventually, he will beat Gage until the point where Gage can't take no more. The reason why I think Ferguson is going to win this fight, in my opinion, he has better ground game. So if it did go to the ground, he could submit Gage off his back. And he has far superior striking. If you look at Justin Gage's last 3 knockouts against James Vick, Donald Cerrone, and Edson Barbosa, the only guy who was pressuring him in all 3 of those fights was Donald Cerrone. And yes, Gage was able to KO him eventually, but Cerrone got a few shots off. And I think if that was Ferguson, it wouldn't work out as well for Gage because Ferguson has more power in his hands, has more unorthodox striking, and more ways to beat you. Justin Gage wants to get you on the back foot, wants to get you backing up, wants to get you to eventually drop your hand so he can land that big overhand right. He wants to slug it out. And against a guy like Tony Ferguson, that just isn't going to work. Ferguson is going to get in close. He's going to be too close for Gage to use that range to put all that power into that right hand. And I truly believe Ferguson is eventually going to clinch him up against the cage, cut him up with elbows, or stand there and just jab the face off him, land some unorthodox strike, a spinning back elbow here and there, a knee to the face here and there, eventually maybe even get a takedown himself. If it goes to the ground, I see Ferguson submitting him off his back or just submitting him off the top. But on the feet, I think Tony Ferguson is far superior. He will use his jab effectively. He will use his elbows, all of his unorthodox striking. And I'm picking Tony Ferguson by KO in the 4th round. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a bit of work, whether the doctor stops it in between. But Tony Ferguson, in my opinion, is going to beat Justin Gage. Is going to beat the brakes off Justin Gage. Hasn't been defeated in, 6 years? 12-fight win streak. Like, I love Justin Gage, but I really don't think he stands a chance in this fight other than than that one big right hand, which you never know could happen because Ferguson is wild enough to put him in a position to get hit with that shot. But anyways, guys, those are my picks for UFC 249. I don't do a lot of UFC videos, so I hope you like them. Let me know if you want to see more. I'll try and do upcoming cards. And please, if you can, smash that like button, smash that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out a lot. I'm really trying to get to 1,000, and I really appreciate you guys watching this. Stay safe wherever you're to. Open Ice Hits with Scotty Tuhaki, a.k.a. Scotty UFC today. Over and out, folks.